The Lord will plague you with wasting diseases. Fever, inflammation, until he has destroyed you because of the evil you have done.
Dad?
What are you doing here?
It's Philip.
You need to come home. First I thought it was nightmares, trauma maybe, but it's Dad all over again.
Jesus Christ, Phil, put the hammer down.
What do you expect me to do? Maybe he'll open up to you.
Has it occurred to you Philip's just traumatized by what happened?
He's still with us.
He's coming back.
Philip.
What the hell is it?
That thing is like a parasite. I think this thing needs to grow until it's strong enough. Strong enough for what? To live on its own.
Guys. We received a call from this address.
I can reassure you that everything is fine.
Yeah. I'm afraid we're going to have to insist.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, demonic farmers. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How the hell are you doing, Mike?
I am doing well also. Nice to kind of be back on our normal Fresh Cuts scheduling with kind of a last-minute switcheroo. Because we originally, we were going to cover Front Room, but that ended up not really being a horror movie. So if anyone was listening on the last episode, we switched it up to Demon Disorder on Shudder. But I also need to introduce Dawn. So what's up, Dawn?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
And anybody else who was listening last episode, I have AC again. Woo!
Oh, nice.
I only had to deal with one night of ungodly heat. I basically lost a night of sleep because as much as I love heat, I can't sleep in it. So, yeah. But at least he got us a brand new AC the next day, so I'm happy.
Nice. Yeah, today it got just about to 100, but then tomorrow's supposed to drop by like 15 degrees. So
it hit 116 in LA today.
Ouch. Good old September summer.
Yeah, I got 104, I think, is my high when I was on work.
Nice.
Yeah, I always say for me on the what, because I watch football at NFL, but it never feels like football season the first month when you live out here on the West Coast because it's still so hot.
Never really feels like football season at all to me. In December, I mean, when it's 75 degrees outside, still doesn't really feel like football, but that's okay. I've gotten used to it living out here now, like 24 years. So, yeah, I dig it.
All right, so today we are covering what I just mentioned, The Demon Disorder, which is a release from this past Friday on Shudder. So let's see the synopsis. So this is how it's written up. Tells the story of Graham, Jake, and Philip Riley and their deceased father. Their paths collide when a family secret is discovered, leading their father's garage to become the site of revenge from beyond the grave. I think that's what it said. My screen is kind of blocked. But that kind of sums it up well as far as the synopsis goes. And let's start with our general thoughts. We will go right into those with Venom. What did you think of The Demon Disorder?
This is a very interesting movie. It's solidly a good film. It borders on great. I can't call this great because there's multiple reasons I have for it. I feel like the pacing is a little bit slow. It is solidly a slow burn for the first two acts, which I'm usually not against for the most part. It's just, I'm just stating a fact in case anybody's interested in watching this movie later. You don't get, there's not a whole lot of reveals about what we're actually, like the story. We get very basic bits of information, but when we finally get to like the third act and we actually get to see our titular demon, it leaves you scratching your head a little bit about what you're actually looking at, you know what I mean? And I can't really get into that now. That's definitely solidly a spoiler, but so when I was done watching the movie, and I literally just finished watching the movie a half hour ago, I only had a chance to watch it once this weekend because of other things I had going on, but I did watch it right before the show, and like I said, I enjoyed it. It's a good movie. I think the thing that everybody's going to be talking about is going to be the practical effects, very much like The Void. When The Void came out back in 2017, a lot of people were hailing its practical effects, and I feel like that's what's going to happen with this movie. We get a first-time writer-director in Stephen Boyle, but Stephen Boyle does have a long list of movies that he's worked on doing effects, going all the way back to 2004. And the movie The Undead, which was a, kind of a zombie movie out of Australia. Obviously, this is an Australian production, Australian actors. Stephen Boyle is very solidly Australian. He's worked on stuff like Black Sheep, other genre fare that's come out of Australia. But this is, like I said, this is his writing and directorial debut. And I think he does a great job. I mean, for a first-time director and writer, this is a damn good movie for a first timer. Like I said, I think the reason that I'm being so overly judgmental is that this movie does fall under demonic possession, the demonic possession subgenre, which is my favorite subgenre of horror. I mean, The Exorcist is my favorite movie of all time. And, I love, demonic possession movies, religious horror, things like that. That's what really speaks to me. So I tend to get a little bit judgmental on that. So I've heard a lot of positive reviews for this. My review for it won't be nearly as positive. Like I said, the plot, maybe not plot holes, but the elements of the story that they decided not to tell us that some people are going to say aren't vital to the story, because ultimately, it's just the story of these three brothers and how they're dealing with an evil on their family farm. Fairly simple. But the story does have layers to it. It's not a straight demonic possession movie by any stretch of the imagination. I also do want to praise the trend of non-religious demonic possession movies that have been coming out. Obviously, my number one movie from last year, When Evil Lurks, another demonic possession movie that has no religion whatsoever. This movie, again, has no religion. It's just, these brothers trying to figure out how to deal with what's inhabiting the family farm. So overall, I think this is a very, very solid movie. Really, really good. Some people are going to think it's great, but like I said, for me, it borders on great. Low body count for a demonic possession movie. I think we only get one kill in the whole movie, and it's an inconsequential character, so there's no emotional impact to that death, which kind of bothers me. But, we'll talk about that a little bit more during the walkthrough. I like that it's an isolated film. I mean, it's not really a one-location film. It's more of a two-location film. Most of it takes place at the garage that used to be owned by the brother's dad, and now it belongs to one of the brothers. And then the family farm itself, where they all lived, where they grew up with their father. So, I mean, the majority of the movie takes place in those two spots. One thing that kind of is disappointing is atmosphere. One thing that Stephen Boyle needs to work on is building his atmosphere and building his worlds, because this movie, it feels disjointed at times. It doesn't really go for the dread so much because it is a body horror possession movie. They're definitely leaning on the practical effects. They're leaning on the creature designs throughout the movie, things like that. And of course, the mutating body effects that we see throughout the film. Oh man, I almost feel bad talking down about the movie because, like I said, it is a very, very good movie. I think it does get a recommend from me. I think everyone should check this out, whether you're a fan of demonic possession or not. At the very least, check out, the fact that they're doing something different. Kind of like last year with When Evil Lurks, they did something different with demonic possession, and now the Demon Disorder is also doing something a little bit differently. What else can I say that's general thoughts? You know what? I think I'm just going to cut my general thoughts off there and leave a little bit more for my partners to talk about. But yeah, overall, good practical effects, a good story. There's one more thing I did want to say in my general thoughts is at times this movie felt like Relic. Do you guys remember Relic? The movie from a couple of years ago that Don actually famously really liked, with the 3 generations of women dealing with, a mental, it was like a mental health allegory. At times, this movie felt like a mental health allegory, especially when we're seeing the lucid moments with the dad, the flashbacks of the dad in his lucid moments. It definitely felt like, very similar to that one, where he knows he's getting some kind of mental health issue. He knows it's going to affect him and it's going to affect his family. So it's almost like he's preparing them a little bit. And then that mental health kind of almost takes physical form, if you will, very much like The Relic. I think The Relic is a little bit better film. It definitely goes more with the implied horror. They definitely nail the atmosphere and dread in that movie a lot more than this one. This one, it's the isolation really more than anything that gives you the sense of dread, because these guys are on a farm that's kind of out in the sticks. There's not really a whole lot of people around. It takes the police forever to get there once they're called. So that's definitely kind of the sense of dread that you get. But I still think I'm still very interested to see what Stephen Boyle is going to do moving forward. I think if he, tries to really work on the atmosphere, his world building, and then just that overall sense of dread, something that Longlegs did masterfully earlier this year, where from beginning to end, you have that over-encompassing sense of something is wrong here and I can't put my finger on it. So, but I am definitely going to watch Stephen Boyle's career more closely moving forward, because for a debut, this is a great film. If Stephen Boyle were a more seasoned director, I might say, more middle of the road, maybe leaning towards, the good side of the road, if you will. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now and just say good movie. I recommend it. But it's not going to be anywhere near my top 10 for the end of the year. And it just feels like a lot of missed opportunities for me. It feels like the movie could have gone bigger, could have gone, more over the top. Obviously, there's budgetary restraints. I mean, this is still an independent film out of Australia. And even with the amount of practical effects we got, it's the kind of thing where I still kind of was hoping to see a little bit more. And I was ultimately a little disappointed with the final form of our demon at the end, but we'll get into that during the walkthrough. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Kick it over to Dawn. Your thoughts on Demon Disorder?
Well, this one's going to be kind of short. I'm almost in complete agreement with Venom on everything. The story's fine. Budgetary limitations and director's skill set, kind of taken into account here. That keeps it kind of small, keeps it kind of restrained. Not really a whole lot going on until it gets to the final act, which is where it really gets fun. Really great effects. I don't see any kind of like legendary gross out moments, but I do see that as being kind of like the big selling point here. Atmosphere's kind of touch and go, like he said. Again, some of that is because there's not a lot of depth into what's going on. We're just dropped into this relationship, and we're supposed to just infer by what's happening from the various interactions and confrontations that they have leading up to the I can't really say that it's an exorcism scene, but it's kind of by proxy close enough. Again, we'll leave the details at that, but again, it's kind of based on what's happening in here, that's like the closest thing you get to an exorcism scene. So that's going to be like the real high point here. I will say the relic comparison is kind of right in there. Again, the isolated family, the history of mental illness, the legacy that it carries on, running through the family generations, all that kind of stuff. It really, really, really reminded me of it. I'm not as big on this one as I am on Relic, just because, again, that just brings it more, grief trauma porn, and I'm just so over that. It's not that effective anymore. Please stop using it. I'm tired of it. It is a little bit more intriguing just to go for the body horror route rather than the demonic spirit or possession route, even though that it does fall into this. It goes down that road, but it's still not completely there. It goes for more of a, I can't quite say it's Cronenbergian, but I do feel like this could potentially be something that he would have done, probably maybe, Shivers Rabbit era, Cronenberg, not like, the modern period, but, back when he was actually tolerable as a filmmaker. But I'll leave that one as it may. But it's fine for what it is. Again, the budgetary limitations, the director's experience should be taken into account here. The care and love is placed all in the final act, which is where it really gets fun. Some of those confrontations, the chaotic energy, the unknown of what's happening, trying to keep everything under control and keep it from escaping, all that works fine. There's not a whole lot to, really say about it. Just, those are the fun scenes, and that's really where it's going to get a lot of its rewatch value. But even still, it's really not that high. You're only probably going to get maybe 30, 40 minutes of, usable material out of, a quick 85-minute watch. So, like maybe a little over half of the movie is just, not quite that interesting. And then you finally get that fun, just balls out creature gore and, goopy madness in the final act. But I mean, we've covered worse. You've heard us last week. So that should be an indication that, the fact that we're still at this stage in the section of the podcast instead of already going into the walkthrough should be an indication of our thoughts on this one. So, you could do worse. I wouldn't say it's a definite recommend. If you've got something for 2024 watch for October coming up next month, either a body horror film or a Australian movie or a foreign film of some kind on your Halloween watch list, this could be one if you're going for new films for your lists. But I wouldn't say it's a must-watch priority on your queue, unless that's kind of how you plan on going about it. So, I don't really have much else to add. Again, the Relic conversation was going to be my main selling point, just because of the cultural similarities and the intrigue of what's going on. But I guess Venom beat me to that one. But like I said, not important, but you could do a lot worse. I would probably recommend this a little bit more for those waiting next month for Halloween marathons or viewing challenges, kind of a thing. But other than that, take at your own risk. If you're just wanting to build up your credentials for your list, give it a shot. But otherwise, let some other high priority watches you may have missed go first before giving this one a shot. So back to you, Mike.
All right. I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a decent little movie, a cool little find for Shudder. Definitely like better than a lot of the stuff they had on there lately. The setup kind of reminded me a little bit of The Dark and the Wicked, because you have like one of the characters who has kind of left that aspect of his life behind, or at least tried to get away from it, and then he's the past comes back to get him for like unfinished business with the household and kind of dealing with the aftermath of a relative passing away. I also just kind of watched this movie almost like maybe I finished it 20-30 minutes before we were recording, so I haven't had a ton of time to digest it, but my initial guess is like, wow, we do I mean, obviously there's some literal like practical effects and demon stuff, or if we want to refer to it as actual demon, all that stuff is going on, but I'm sure there's, I think like Dawn suggested, there's probably some metaphorical stuff as well, like generational trauma, or I think our main character is probably experiencing some guilt because the other brother's obviously kind of angry. He's pulling like the "oh, you just left us behind" type of thing, where the one that left is like giving his justification for why. So you have a lot of that familiar family dynamic, and I do like it. I do kind of like the relationship between the brothers because you kind of understand the viewpoints of all of them as far as like what was going on in the past and why it's led them to the path where we're currently at. I don't find it to be as good as The Dark and the Wicked. I just found the setup to be kind of like a similar premise. Like Venom said, practical effects are pretty good, but I also do agree that like the final form of the demon, it's not just that it's kind of lackluster, but once they show it, it's almost too much on screen because it kind of has that diminishing returns. Like the longer you see it, the more you're like, I kind of like the practical effects on here when it's just like body parts and body pieces and things coming out. Like that stuff was really good. It's just when you get the final form of the demon walking around, it's kind of like, okay, this you guys maybe should cut back on that or use a little more shadow and stuff to keep it looking better. But overall, it's a decent movie. I definitely recommend it. Probably not even a top 10 at this point, but that's not as bad of a criticism anymore because now that we're hitting like the fall months, I guess depending where you live, but we're getting to the point where like it doesn't even have to be a top 10 anymore to be considered good. So saying it's not a top 10 isn't necessarily bashing the movie like it would have been in like February, March when you just knew something would never qualify for a top 10.
I mean, this could solidly be an honorable mention, I'd say.
Yeah, probably as of now, yeah.
I'd have to check. I probably have it around my top 30.
A little bit higher for me. I mean, not that I rate every single movie I watch as I watch them, but I'd probably have it maybe like top 20. Only because the movie didn't frustrate me at any point, and you guys know how easily I get frustrated. I mean, Mike could probably imagine me seething in my seat at the movie theater watching The Front Room this weekend. I mean, I contemplated walking out of that theater at least 3 or 4 times while the movie was playing, but I powered through it and I finished it. But yeah, for the most part, like I said, there's no shitty characters in this movie. No hateable characters, no bad performances. The movie has a decent score. Like on a technical aspect, the movie is pretty solid. Not masterful by any stretch, because we've already talked about Steven needing to work a little bit on his atmosphere and sense of world building. But no. This is a damn good movie. Like I said, I think with me, as I already said, I'm very judgmental of my demonic possession movies. So something like this, which is probably going to get a lot of praise from the horror community, is just going to get mild praise from me. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd have to like look over my list again, but I'm assuming Don's watched a lot of more 2024 movies than me, probably, so it would make sense why it would be pushed further down his list. But yeah, I mean, overall, I would say give it a shot. It's on Shudder, so chances are if you're listening to this, you sub, so you should be able to watch it. And it's 85 minutes, so sub 90 minutes makes it really easy to fit in, which is
awesome.
Cool. Which kind of contributed to why I watched it so close to our actual recording time, because I knew I could fit it in. I think I originally went to go watch it last night, but it was just late and I was super tired. So, yeah, I mean, other than that, it's kind of just everything everybody already said up to now. So I'll kind of leave that there for the moment. Back to you, Venom.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a whole lot more I can talk about that's non-spoiler. I said that there was no religion in this movie, and I forgot. There's actually one little piece of iconography in the third act, but it's so meaningless that I actually forgot about it. But we'll get into that during the walkthrough. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else we can really talk about. Like I said, this is a movie that solidly should be watched. It's getting a recommend. It's not going to get my highest recommend by any stretch of the imagination, but I still think, if you have a Shudder subscription and you're looking for something to watch, obviously the last couple of weeks in the theater haven't been great with stuff like The Front Room and Afraid. So stay home, crack open a beer, and watch The Demon Disorder instead. I think you'll be better off for it.
Especially with our temperatures.
Oh God, yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is the day I didn't have AC, I actually went to the movie specifically because I didn't have AC. What did I go see? I went and watched that terrible Crow movie. It was literally the only thing playing that I hadn't seen that I would sit through. And that movie I almost wanted to walk out of too, but the AC was so nice. Anyway. All right, folks, that's going to be your final spoiler warning. If you have not watched The Demon Disorder and are interested in it, go ahead and pause the podcast, go check out the movie, and then join us to get more detailed thoughts on what we thought about this one. If you've already seen it or don't care to watch it, then please join us for what shouldn't be too long of a walkthrough. 84-minute or 85-minute movie that's, fairly basic demon possession, just with some extra little, bells and whistles added on here and there. So here we go, folks. Our movie opens up with almost like a dual cold open. The first bit of the cold open basically just shows an old man sitting on the side of his bed, and we hear him talking very cryptically about the mind and how, people could lose their mind might deceive them. And, it's very obvious that he's speaking about mental health disorders like, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that, where the older generation will start to lose their mental capabilities. So he's talking about stuff like that. And then suddenly the camera pans down and we see that he's actually shackled to the bed. He's got a chain wrapped around one of his legs, and he is actually chained up to this bed. And eventually, he just kind of barks, very demonic sounding, and that ends that part of the cold open. And then after that, we go to a farm. We see two brothers, one way older than the other, very obviously, and he goes out to. Basically, the younger brother goes out and finds his older brother out in the barn of the farm, and what we see is a cow that, the best way I can describe it is one of two things. Either A, it looks like it's been skinned, or B, it looks like it's inside out. And I don't know if this thing was just born. Like I said, we don't get a lot of context. We just see this thing. It's lying on the ground. It's too big to be a newborn, so I'm gonna assume that something skinned it, and it's still alive. That's the sad part, is this thing is like missing all its skin, and it's still mooing and in pain. Eventually the older brother takes out a gun, and as the younger brother walks away, we hear a single gunshot, and then we go to our title. So yeah, it's kind of a dual cold open with two smaller scenes there. All right, after this we are introduced. Who's the first one that we're introduced to? It is Graham, right? Yeah, Graham is so Graham Riley. These are the Riley brothers. There are three of them. Graham owns a garage, which was his father's garage when his father was still alive, and he employs a young girl named Cole, which, I don't know. Did Cole seem like a waste of a character? Like, what was her purpose? It seemed like her purpose was just
I almost forgot about her.
Yeah, exactly. She's so meaningless that you almost forget about her. And one day here at the garage, Graham gets a visit from his brother Jake. And Jake, he's obviously the older brother. He looks disheveled. He's drinking. He basically walks into this guy's kitchen, pulls beer out of his fridge, starts eating a birthday cake that was meant for his younger brother. Because as it turns out, the younger brother is named Philip, and as it turns out, it's actually his 28th birthday today. But for some reason, Graham bought a cake, and he was just going to eat it himself. Like he had no intention of actually going to visit and celebrating the birthday. And we'll find out why as we go along. Basically, Graham seems upset that Jake is there. He doesn't like that his brother is there. And he asks him, why are you here? What the hell do you want? And after some coaxing, he finally pulls out his phone and shows Graham a video of Philip and a cell phone video. And what the video is basically Philip with his back turned to the phone. And you hear you almost hear him speaking in tongues. And then finally he turns around after Jake gets his attention, and it turns out he's holding a hatchet in his hand, and he attacks his brother, and he basically runs right towards the camera. Obviously, brother didn't get chopped up because he's there showing his Graham the video. And then the last thing he says was, "It's what happened to Dad. I think it's happening again." And we just leave it at that. Graham eventually does decide to go back to the family farm and make a visit. He visits with his brother Jake. He sees his brother Philip, who seems fine. Obviously, he seems fine now. Just a normal 28-year-old guy, just doing his chores, doing what he needs to do. But then that evening, while Graham is asleep on the couch at the family farm, he hears something out in the barn. He decides to go, first he hears something up in Philip's room. So he goes walking up to Philip's room. Philip isn't in there. And he starts looking around the room, and he ends up finding a live chicken underneath Phil's bed. So he ends up, he grabs the chicken, and he's going to go take it back out to the chicken coop, which they have there on the farm. As he starts walking towards the chicken coop, he realizes that the path to the chicken coop is lined with dead chickens. There's every few feet, there's another dead chicken that looks like it's been torn open. They're all bloody and, crazy looking. Finally, when he gets to the barn, he finds Philip. And what is Philip doing? Yes, Philip is eating live chickens. He's literally just biting them in the neck and drinking their blood. I'm not even sure if they were doing it just for blood or if they were actually biting parts of the chicken off. It seemed like they were doing it just for blood because, the chicken bodies that were left behind were still kind of whole. They just had blood all over them. When Graham is able to get Philip's attention, Philip turns around and just attacks him. And basically he jumps on him, straddles him, holds him down on the ground, and then takes a bite out of his chest. And I'm not exaggerating, folks. Literally, he bites down on Graham's chest and bites a big chunk of his flesh off, spits it out. And then at that moment Jake then eventually shows up. They help restrain Philip. They end up tying Philip up to a bed. The next day, they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on with Philip. And what ends up happening, and I'm skipping around a little bit here, folks, because like I said, I only watched the movie once, so I'm just going to give you the major plot points. At one point, Philip again starts speaking in tongues, and his eyes actually turn black. In the scene where he attacks Graham in the barn, his eyes are red. They're fucking blood red. In this scene, his eyes are black, just completely midnight black. And they're trying to restrain Philip, and eventually they start seeing, and this is shown in the trailer, they start seeing some kind of pulsating at the base of his neck. Like there's something underneath inside of his body moving. Eventually, Jake starts sticking his hand down inside of Philip's mouth, thinking that he might be able to get it out of there. And he actually does. The thing actually comes up through his throat. And when they pull it out, it looks like it almost looks like a human tongue. Like they literally just pulled a tongue out of this guy's mouth. But then suddenly the thing has tentacles. It's got like pustules on it. and it's moving. It's fucking moving. It's a Lovecraftian nightmare, to say the least. But it's small. It's only about the size of a baseball at this point. Now, they're obviously, this thing, came out of Philip's mouth, so they're concerned with Philip's health. So, they're trying to take care of Philip. Eventually, the thing that came out of Philip runs away, basically leaves the room. Jake and Graham give chase, trying to chase this thing. They can't find it. Eventually, we get that scene very reminiscent of like an Alien movie where Jake walks into the room and suddenly some kind of slime or something is dripping on his shoulder from above him. He looks up, and there's the little thing up there on the ceiling. This part is CG, unfortunately. They probably couldn't do it in practical and make the thing look like it was moving freely really well on the ceiling. So unfortunately, this is CG, but it's fine. It's not like it looks bad. It's just very obviously CG. And there's other CG things in the movie too. So don't think that this is 100% practical. It is a majority practical, absolutely, but there is still some CGI in here. Eventually, they do catch the thing, and they put it inside of a cake pan, like one of those cake with a lid on it, a cake plate with a lid on it that they can snap shut. So they stick the thing in there, and they realize that the thing has gotten bigger. In the time that it left Philip's mouth and they were giving chase, it somehow, maybe not doubled in size, but it got a lot bigger. And it almost takes up the entirety of the cake pan. Once they get it in there, it's almost taken up all the space. And it definitely wasn't that big when it first came out of Jake's mouth. Eventually, they chain Jake to the bed, and they keep this thing in the cake pan, kind of snapped shut so that it can't get out. Let's see. Graham decides to go clean up the bathroom, the room where this thing came out of Philip's body, because there's blood all over the place. So he decides to clean up the bathroom. Jake decides to go and clean the chicken coop with all the dead chickens, and he didn't actually see it. So when he actually goes out there and sees all of his chickens dead, he almost looks sad. It's almost a sad little scene, because he kind of looks down and he looks defeated, when he sees it. And then we peppered throughout the movie is flashbacks of when they were dealing with their father. And as it turns out, yes, their father was possessed by something that was making him dangerous. And we actually find out that he also ate chickens, which is why Graham is a little upset with his brother Jake for still having chickens on the farm. He actually asks him, don't you think that's in poor taste? And Jake just kind of blows him off, because Dad was eating chickens and you're still going to go raising chickens here. And now Philip's eating chickens. So very obviously they are dealing with the same thing that happened to their father. So, more of the movie passes. Eventually Philip wakes up chained to the bed. The thing that crawled out of him is still in the cake pan, still alive and moving. Philip basically tells his brother, look, the thing that was in me is out of me. I'm fine now. Can you please untie me? And, Graham is obviously a little skittish about, untying his brother who just took a chunk out of him the night before. But he gets convinced, and he's like, all right, you're not possessed anymore, I guess, since the thing came out of you. So he lets his brother up. But then in Graham's infinite wisdom, he leaves his brother alone with the thing while he goes and continues to clean the bathroom. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, there's not a whole lot of bad decisions in this movie, but there are one or two that I would question, and this is one of them. Like, I don't know what the hell you're thinking about leaving your brother alone with this thing, because what ends up happening? The brother ends up consuming it again. I don't know. Now, we don't actually get to see the scene, so I don't know if the brother actually manually, like purposely, took it back into his body, or if the thing maybe escaped the cake pan and, he recognized his vessel. He recognized Philip as his vessel, broke out of the cake pan, and forcefully went back into Philip. We're not sure. But yes, eventually the thing does get back into Philip, and then Philip once again starts to attack his brothers. His eyes go black. They finally decide, we can't do this here. I don't know what to do. You know, we can't do this on the farm. They basically say, you know, we can't do the same thing that we did with Dad. So obviously something happened to Dad that they're not really proud of. So they, for whatever reason, they decide to go back to the garage, the family garage that, you know, was owned by the dad, is now owned by Graham. And while they're there, they once again chain up Graham. Unfortunately, when they get there, Cole, the teenage girl, is there. She's working after hours. She's basically working on a car, like a side project that she has. But she picked the wrong fucking night to do it, because at this point, the movie just goes completely off the rails in the best possible way, mind you. Once they're at the garage, they basically tie up Philip, and they start. What's funny is that this is probably one of the most realistic things I've seen in a possession movie in a while. They start talking about what they've seen in movies. Like Jake is like, well, in these kind of movies, they always have a cross. You know, that like the demon is like they're afraid of religion, or they're afraid of a cross. So maybe, you know, we should do that. And they do exactly that. They end up making a makeshift cross, a crucifix, a big one, like a 4 or 5 foot tall one, and they hang it right above the spot where Philip is chained to the floor. He's not on a gurney or a cabinet or anything. He's literally on the ground, chained up on the ground. They, the two brothers, they go into a car and they just start talking while they're watching their brother. You know, they start talking about the past and everything else, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Cole wants to call the police, but the brothers are like, no police, no ambulance, just do not call anyone. But Cole, the problem is that they tell Cole this, but they don't give Cole any other information, like, oh, this is my brother. You know, we have a history of this in our family, and this is something that we have to deal with, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's multiple things that he could have said to Cole to prevent her from doing what she eventually does, which is exactly what she was told not to do. She ends up calling the police because she doesn't know what's going on. The funny thing is that she doesn't see anything horrific before she calls the police. She's calling them just because she's worried about Phil's well-being. Once she calls the police, the shit hits the fan, my friends, because what ends up happening is Phil. Oh, before this though, I wanted to say something about this conversation. These two brothers, despite being kind of country bumpkins, do seem to be fairly smart about what they're dealing with, because even though we as the audience don't really get a lot of backstory as to what this thing is, the brothers realize that it's not so much a demonic possession so much as a parasite. And Graham realizes that the parasite is a demon in and of itself, and that it's basically using human hosts as incubation chambers. It's basically growing. It has to grow inside of a human body. So hence why it was inside of Dad first. And at this point in the movie, we actually finally get a flashback to show us what ended up happening with Dad. So like I said, we get various flashbacks throughout the movie showing Dad basically deteriorate. He goes from this great, smart, you know, loving father to basically just deteriorating to this evil fucking demon who's eating raw chickens, you know, live chickens and blah, blah, blah. What ends up happening is Graham finally decides he can't take it anymore. And this is all in a flashback, mind you. Graham grabs a pillow and tries to smother his father. Basically puts the pillow over his face, smothers him until his father stops moving. Now, this is the mistake that people always make. When you're smothering, and I probably shouldn't say this because I might be giving some people out there ideas. When you're smothering someone, don't pick up the pillow as soon as they stop moving. They're not dead yet. They're just passed out. You have to leave the pillow there for at least another 30 seconds to a minute. You got to deprive the brain of oxygen for longer than just the time that they're struggling. So there's a nice hint for any future serial killers out there. Anyway, Graham smothers his father, and he pulls the pillow up and he thinks his dad is dead. You know, his eyes are open, his mouth is open. It looks like he has finally passed away. At that moment, he goes to reach for something on the bedside table, and we get that classic jump scare. When he turns back around, his dad is sitting up on the bed, and he's all demoned out. You know, he doesn't look like dad anymore. His face is all contorted. He's got the scars and, the black eyes, everything else, blah, blah, blah. He realizes that Graham was trying to kill him, so he then jumps on top of Graham and tries to strangle him. Jake walks into the room, and this is a much younger Jake, mind you. Like, he's not all gray and disheveled like he is, in the present day. And he freezes up. He doesn't know what to do. Like, obviously, the normal thing would be to jump on your dad and try to get him off of Graham so he doesn't kill him. But Jake freezes up completely. But then Philip walks in, and with one of those, what the hell were those things called? The security bar that we used to put on our steering wheels in cars back in like the 80s and 90s. I can't remember the name of the damn thing. But he basically grabs one of those things, which is a big hunk of metal, and he just hits his father on the back of the head as hard as he can. And then the dad falls on the ground, and we start seeing the death rattle, where he starts shaking. Basically, the life is leaving his body. All three brothers then are on the floor, and they're just kind of talking to each other, like, what are we going to do now? What do we do? And then this is when Graham makes the decision that he can't stay at this farm anymore, that he has to leave. And he tries to convince his brother, Philip, his younger brother, to also leave. But Philip doesn't want to leave because Jake is definitely not going to leave. Because like I said, Jake is older. He's an alcoholic. He doesn't really have any job prospects. So the fact that he has the family farm paid for, he's not going to leave. So it makes sense that Jake leaves. And then it also makes sense that Philip stays with Jake because, Jake being the oldest, he's probably the closest one to, potentially getting another mental health issue if this whole thing does run in the family, which as we find out, it kind of does. So that's the flashback giving us the reveal of how Dad finally died. Flash forward back to the garage, back to present day, and basically they have Philip on the ground chained up, and then suddenly the police show up and they're bashing at the front door of the garage. Because according to them, somebody called 911 from this location, but they didn't say anything. Like they either hung up or, the phone was just dead when the police picked up. So they decided to send a unit out here anyway. What they decide to do is they unchain Philip. They take him, him and Jake take him and take him to the back office, the office of the garage. And while they're in there, and this is one thing I don't really get, but Jake basically holds a gun to Cole's face, telling her not to make a sound. Like I said, Cole still doesn't really get a grasp of what's actually happened. She hasn't really. The only thing that she's seen at this point is the hubcap attack. Basically, when her and Graham go back to the office the first time, all of the hubcaps on the wall come flying towards them, and they basically have to hide under the desk to avoid getting smashed with hubcaps. So that's literally the only supernatural thing that Cole has seen up to this point. But like I said, that happened after she had already called the police. So anything that happens at this point, even if she starts to believe them, it's not going to stop the police from coming. So they take, so like I said, everybody's now hiding in the office except for Graham. Graham answers the door, lets the police know, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't call anybody. I didn't call you guys, and I'm here alone. The police ask if they can come in. He says he'd rather not. I'm thinking, dude, they don't have a warrant. They can't come. I mean, maybe Australian law is different. I'd have to look it up. But at least in America, the cops can't just show up at your house and you have to let them in. You absolutely do not have to let police into your house unless they have a warrant. So that's what I'm thinking the whole time. I'm like, just tell the cops to get a warrant. Just tell them, no, you can't come in, go get a warrant and come back. That's going to kill at least a couple of hours because they have to go and get a circuit court judge to fill out the form, sign the warrant, blah, 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 blah. So, but eventually what ends up happening is Philip something starts coming out of Philip's wound. Now, all throughout this movie, and I'm sorry I haven't actually mentioned it, Philip has had a weird wound under his left arm. It almost looks like he's broken out, like a rash or something, or moles, like maybe like a bunch of moles or something. It doesn't look normal because, like I said, he's only 28 years old, so there's no reason he should have that. Suddenly, as Graham is trying to get rid of the cops, something starts poking out of that part of his body. And I'm not exaggerating here, folks. A fucking hand. Think demons. Think the original demons, and think about the little demon that came out of that girl's back. Well, this guy is coming out of Jake's armpit, or the area, near his armpit. First, we see a couple of fingers poke out, a couple of nasty demonic fingers, and then a whole hand pokes out. I'm sitting here thinking, how the hell is he going to survive this? There's no way he's going to survive a demon being birthed from his body, basically tearing out of his body. Fortunately, the demon that pops out, the thing that pops out of Philip, and it does eventually completely pop out, isn't all that big. It's like maybe the size of an infant. And it's basically kind of white. It's slimy. It doesn't have any major features like eyeballs or arms or legs or anything. It looks almost like a tadpole, a frog before it develops its arms and legs. So it kind of looks like a giant tadpole. And then it kind of starts to crawl away, and it crawls into the shower. Graham has a shower in his office, and it actually crawls into the shower and just kind of sits there. I guess it feels safe in there for a little while. Then we start to see the mutation. This thing, literally, it starts growing. It starts developing arms, like arms pop out of it, and then like legs. We see like some stubby things growing out of his bottom that will eventually become legs, and then they split so that, he's got the top part of the leg and the lower part of the leg. They literally were like one whole part, and then they split. I'm trying to explain the effect because I fucking loved it. And then, like I said, the arms pop up. Eventually, it starts to develop a little bit of a face, at the head area. No, it's very mutated. I mean, it's very vaguely humanoid. It looks like it may have been a human at one point and then got dipped in like nuclear waste or something. But, that's basically what we're looking at. Like I said, Mike and I both talked about the mild disappointment that we felt when we finally get to see this thing. And then, like I said, the police that have already shown up, they eventually do hear a noise coming from the back office, and they basically force their way in. They start looking around. One of the police officers, there's a male and a female police officer. The male police officer ends up walking to the back room where that shower is, and he ends up getting attacked by the thing that came out of Philip. Philip is on the ground and he's fine. Like, he's not screaming in pain. He's just kind of on the ground, just kind of resting from, having just given birth to a demon. And basically this kill is the only kill of our film, but it's actually not a bad little kill. Basically what ends up happening is the demon grabs the officer by the head and actually uses his head almost like a bowling ball, where it jams its fingers in its eye sockets and into its nose, and he just starts slamming his head up against the wall. We only get to see quick shots of it, sadly. It's not like the camera's going to stay static on it, but what we see is actually pretty gnarly. Like, this head getting crushed against the wall, and then finally the cop is just thrown to the ground. Now, at this point, the female officer is still in the main part of the garage with Graham, and she hears something. So she starts saying, wait, what's going on back there? And she starts looking for her partner. Just as she's about to walk into the room where her dead partner is laying on the ground, Jake shows up with his gun, hits her on the head to knock her out, and simultaneously shoots himself in the foot. I don't think this is fucking possible, folks. Like, I don't think the Keystone Cops could have fucking come up with this. But yeah, he literally hits the cop with the butt of the gun, and at the moment that he hits the cop, the gun goes off and shoots him in the foot. It's almost a comedy routine at this point. But so now one cop is dead and one cop is out cold. Finally, Cole basically says, I'm going to go get something to drink. She goes to the soda machine. While she's at the soda machine, she sees the demon. And this is when we see the demon in all its glory. Basically, it comes out into the light and it stands up. It's about a little shorter than the average human. It's not ultra tall by any stretch, but it can't walk very fast. It basically just kind of hobbles around. Eventually, all three brothers come out. Philip is with them, and he seems fine, despite having a new hole in the side of his body. Jake with a new hole in his foot. All the brothers have new holes. Actually, yes, all three of them do have new holes, because I forgot Graham got a chunk of his chest bitten off. So all three brothers now have new holes on their body. That's interesting. Anyway, this thing basically comes out, and Graham basically calls it Dad. Like, he thinks it's his father. I didn't get that impression watching the movie, but reading the synopsis on IMDb, it's almost like that's what they're implying. They're implying that this is actually their dad, not a demon, not the demon that was possessing their father, but that it's actually the reincarnation of their father. I don't know where they came up with this, but that's what they're going with. And like I said, the synopsis kind of confirms that. So
yeah, I was a little confused on that too.
Right? Like was possessed, or was he a demon?
Yeah, I think that's maybe one thing I can detract from the movie is like it has some ideas going on, but it's hard to make out exactly, like, are we just to take this 100% on face value of what's going on, or is there supposed to be allegories going on, or what?
Yeah.
Or if it's even actually like a demon, because I've even heard like theories that like it's more just some like kind of weird alien creature or something, and they just think it's a demon because that's their best explanation.
Oh, hey, that quite possible. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. Potentially an alien or some kind of, alien spore or something could have landed on the family farm, gotten itself inside of Dad, and blah blah blah. So,
yeah, because it doesn't necessarily have all the or most of the characteristics you're like used to for like a demon. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's valid, absolutely. Like I said, that's part of why I said earlier that this movie is good, borderline great. It's bordering on great because there's a lot of plot holes. We don't get much explanation. We don't get an explanation on how this started. It's like just Dad started going crazy one day, and that's it. Oops. And then the backstory on the demon itself, like, what is it? Is it a parasite? Is it some kind of, demonic or alien spore? It just, it's up to the viewer. It's left to the viewer. You decide what kind of movie you just watched. So eventually Graham pulls out a gun, the gun that Jake shot himself in the foot with, of course, puts the gun up to the demon's head, and Graham just kind of says, I forget if he said, "I'm sorry, Dad," or "I love you, Dad." He says one of those things, and then he pulls the trigger, which surprisingly kills the thing. Like, one shot to the head kills this thing. So, I mean, maybe it's not a demon. I can't imagine a demon dying from one bullet. But something organic, like an alien, something along those lines, then, yeah, maybe, potentially. Who knows? So, now, one thing that I forgot to mention is that after Philip bit that chunk out of Graham's chest earlier in the film, a fucking eyeball develops in there. So as the movie's going along, Graham realizes that the wound on his chest is coming alive. It's fucking its own little creature. It's got an eyeball sticking out. So at the end of the film, after Graham shoots Dad, and Philip is fine, and Jake is fine, other than the injuries that they've, received recently. Otherwise, they're fine. Graham basically realizes that this isn't over. It's still in me. It may not be the exact same thing that I just killed that came out of Phil, but there's something inside of me. It could be the same demon. It could be a different one, whatever the case may be. So he basically takes the gun, tells Jake to take care of everybody, basically tells them, look, I'm the brother who left. I need to do this. So he goes into his office and with the intention of killing himself. At first, he points the gun towards the wound itself, almost to try to shoot the thing directly. But then he changes his mind and just starts to put the gun up to his temple. At that moment, his two brothers and Cole rush into the room and stop him. They basically wrestle him to the ground. And Graham is basically like, no, I have to end it. It's in me. I don't want to live with this thing in me. Jake, I'll give Jake all the credit in the world. Jake, this is the first smart thing he did the whole movie, grabs a knife from somewhere and actually starts to pull the thing out of Graham's chest. Like almost like he's boring it out with the knife. Eventually they pull it out. And it looks like a little fucking squid. It looks more developed than the thing that came out of Philip. But it's got a head, it's got eyes, it's got a mouth, it's screaming. It's actually screaming when they pull it out of him. And then Jake basically takes the gun, puts the thing on the ground, and just shoots it. Just one big shot, and, blood spreads everywhere, and the thing is conceivably dead. So at this point, it seems like all the quote-unquote demons have been dispatched, and everything seems fine. The brothers basically... they start to hear more sirens, like, backup units coming to see if the cops are okay. Obviously, one of them's dead. One of them is still knocked out inside the garage, but she should be safe since there's no more little demonic creatures running around. So once they hear the sirens, they get into Cole's car and they just drive away. And Cole basically asks them, where are we going? And Graham just says, just drive. We'll figure it out later. And the movie goes to credits from there. And then we actually do get a mid-credits scene in this one. Again, not sure if they're setting up a sequel or what, but basically what happens is we see a blood trail. We see like this long blood trail going through the garage, and the camera is basically following the blood trail. When it finally gets to what's leaving the blood trail, we see the tail end of the little squid creature that they pulled out of Graham's chest, and it's like going into the shower where the other creature went. So it's probably going to go down the shower drain and, go spread and do whatever. But yeah, we get a little bit of a creature setup for a sequel, if you will, which, I'm not always the biggest fan of these kind of scenes. It's like, if you want to do a sequel, just do a fucking sequel. I don't like walking out of a movie feeling like the story's not done yet. And that's kind of what they do with these kind of scenes. But yeah. And that's it, folks. That is The Demon Disorder 2024. This actually is a Shudder original. This is not a movie that Shudder picked up. They actually put production money into this one. So if that interests you at all, not that it really makes a difference to me whether it's a Shudder exclusive or a Shudder original, but just to let you guys know, this is indeed a Shudder original. And that's it from me. Back to Mike.
They kind of set it open for a sequel. I don't foresee like this kind of movie getting a sequel, but you never know. I think they just went for like a typical open ending.
Yeah, if they do give us a sequel, for God's sakes, give us some backstory. Because like I said, folks, we don't find out what these creatures are. We don't find out what they represent. Like, everything in this movie is implied. So it's up to the viewer. You basically decide what those parasites were. Were they demons? Were they aliens? Were they something earthbound? Maybe it was just some kind of bacteria that mutated in a weird way. Who knows? But... in the film, obviously, the brothers, they all think it's possession. They think Dad was possessed, and then they eventually think Philip is possessed. And to an extent, they're not wrong. I mean, he is harboring a parasite. And the parasite is forcing them to do things that they don't want to do, like attack their own family and shit like that. So it still falls under demonic possession. Whether you think it's still a demonic possession film by the end, I think it's up to the individual. I'm going to say, yeah, it probably is, because I don't like alien movies and I don't want to associate this with an alien movie because I'll instantly think of it lower. It'll automatically go down in my ranking if this thing were to turn out to be an alien. I'm just, other than the franchise Aliens, I'm not the biggest Alien fan. It's just not really something that does a whole hell of a lot for me. So yeah, Demon Disorder, solidly a middle of the road film, maybe leaning towards the better part of the road. But yeah, I would still recommend it. Still check it out. And it's Australian cinema. I mean, who doesn't love Australian horror, man? It's good stuff. So check it out.
Yeah, I really did like the dynamic between the brothers. I got to almost watch a movie with the three of them just hanging out and arguing with each other.
I mean, you mentioned The Dark and the Wicked, and I don't think that the relationship here is nearly as compelling as The Dark and the Wicked. The brother and sister duo in The Dark and the Wicked was just so compelling, and you felt so terrible for them. Whereas this movie, we never really get a chance to feel bad for any of these brothers, you know? I mean, they all have their own issues, ultimately. Like, none of them are perfect gentlemen by any stretch of the imagination. Graham is trying. I mean, you know, he's trying to take over the family business, disassociating himself from the family farm and the brothers and everything else. But ultimately, I never really felt anything too powerful for any of these characters. Whereas The Dark and the Wicked, I love that brother and sister. Fucking adore it. If we're going to talk about the family dynamic in this movie, I would make it more akin to Antlers. You remember the brother and sister duo in Antlers, where it wasn't bad. It just wasn't nearly as compelling as The Dark and the Wicked. So I would kind of compare this one to that. I'd probably still put this one above Antlers. I didn't like Antlers very much anyway, aside from the brother, the estranged brother and sister dynamic. But I still think this one is maybe slightly better, but I would put it more akin to Antlers than Dark and the Wicked. Dark and the Wicked was such a great movie. It's hard for me to want to compare any movie to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think I'm thinking back, and I think it was like my second or third on my list for top 10 that year.
Yep.
But anyways, yeah, that's probably going to wrap up our discussion on Demon Disorder and this episode of Fresh Cuts. But did we release any new episodes between the three of us? Venom, start us out.
Yes, finally, we did. No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. Episode number 29 is now available. On that one, we actually had the whole No More Room in Hell family together. Mike was able to join us for the first time on Creature Comforts, and we talked about an absolutely insane Chinese giant snake movie that Don picked. So I'm going to let him talk about it when he goes over his stuff. But yeah, that's available now. It just got put up today, literally about an hour before we went on the air here. So it is now available. Check that out. And then still waiting on times to get a new episode of the Crystal Lake Gift Shop and the main show together. I'm still trying to get scheduling conflicts together. And then I did get my movies for the horror head-to-head, the summer series for the podcast Under the Stairs. I will be looking at, I'll be defending The Burbs against, or no, not The Burbs, The Howling. I will be defending The Howling against Doug Tilley and The Burbs. And then I will also be defending Dance with the Devil with, I forgot the guy's name, David Garrett. I forget his third name. He's got three names. But anyway, he's going to be defending, what's the name of that movie? The Last Circus. So basically, Joe Dante and Alex de la Iglesia movies are the ones that I will be a part of. So I haven't gotten my actual recording date yet, so I'm not sure when we're getting together, but I got my movies, so I already know what I need to watch, and I will make sure I'm prepared before they do that. I'm already halfway through watching all the movies, so that's good. Hopefully that gets recorded sooner than later, and then that'll be released probably a little bit later on. I say summer series, but it's already September. Is this still technically the summer series, Mike?
No, this is kind of like, I think it's like a temporary 1 year replacement for it.
Right.
Because the summer series, there was this so much, there's so much prep that goes into that if you don't get started.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the summer series, from what I understand, is coming back next year. So this was kind of like, well, Duncan didn't want to do nothing, so he came up with this as a temporary solution.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I saw the whole list of hosts and movies, and there's going to be a lot of good movies talked about. I'm actually very happy I got assigned to Alex de la Iglesia. He's actually one of my favorite Spanish directors on the planet. His movie, The Day of the Beast, is a practical masterpiece to me. I adore that film. So I'm actually very excited.
One, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Day of the Beast, Witchin' and Bitchin'. I mean, Witchin' and Bitchin' is a fun-ass witch movie. If you have not seen it, turn your brain off and just enjoy witches doing the most fucked up witchy things ever. But that's pretty much it for me, folks.
All right, how about you, Dawn?
As Venom mentioned, we have the latest Creature Comforts available, and I am so proud to tell you all that we covered the Chinese killer snake movie Rising Boas in a Girls' School. Yes, that is a real film. Yes, that is the real title. And yes, it's even more bonkers than you think it is. I will just say giant killer CGI snakes, airline pilots, and a whole load of action. And that's not even a third of the fun in that movie. We went over that one with the gang plus Mike, as mentioned. So look for that one in the feeds wherever you wherever you look for our shows. I know we have the next episode picked, but I think much like the main show, I think that one's just waiting on recording dates and getting everything together. So we'll let you all know about that one shortly. The the guest spot I mentioned last week when I joined a friend of mine to look at a film called A Feast of Flesh. That is on, it's going to be on a network called the Indie Film Cafe, and it's going to be part of 31 Days of Indie Horror, which, as usual, runs through October if you didn't figure it out. I am told that it will be sometime within the middle of the month, but again, I will let you all know more about that one when the time comes. And only other thing than that is season 3 of Horror Countdown, just getting closer and closer to the end of the year, and we start up season 4. So go ahead and find that pretty much everywhere you find your shows. But other than that, not much else.
All right, sounds good. As far as myself, just sticking to my own stuff for now. I'm trying to, avoid too much until I get everything with the house figured out, because I don't want to start booking myself and then it's like, oh, I can't do this because of this and that. So mostly just fresh cuts for now. Main show we'll probably try to get scheduled soon. But other than that, Venom, is there a theatrical release this week?
Sadly, I mean, this week it's the James McAvoy movie Speak No Evil, which I really have zero interest in watching. I literally have no interest whatsoever. I'll do it if there's nothing better, because I know a lot of people will probably still be interested in our opinion on it since it is a big theatrical release. But yeah, if there's anything else available, I would say let's lean towards that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree. It is a theatrical release, so it's something we can at least fall back on. But we'll keep an eye. We'll keep an eye out this week.
I'm more excited for next week. Next week we got Never Let Go opening in theaters, which I unfortunately I accidentally saw the trailer for it. You guys know I don't watch trailers, but sometimes I can't avoid them. And this one looks mildly interesting. It could turn out to be an M. Night Shyamalan movie where the antagonist isn't what we think it is, but fingers crossed. Let's hope.
All right. Well, with that said, we're going to get out of here. So thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We'll be back in a week with a new one. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
When your father is possessed by a demon and he dies, Leave the fucking farm. Don't get this emotional attachment to familial things. Just fucking leave. This movie would have been so much shorter if the brothers would have all left the farm after Dad died.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Follow when the guy says get the hell off the farm. Listen.
Yep.
All right. Peace.